They finally did it. Took them 2 weeks, and nobody quite understands why it took them 2 weeks, but they have now done it. Republicans in Congress today finally moved to name Republican members of Congress who will be seated on the Intelligence Committee in the House. Again, nobody knows why it took them this long, but it has been a consequential delay. When Democrats won the majority in the House in this fall's elections, they won by a big enough majority that not only did the Democrats take, of course, the chairmanship and the numerical majority on every committee in the House, on the Intelligence Committee, it was actually a really big shift in terms of the numbers. The Republicans not only lost the chairmanship of the Intelligence Committee, they lost 4 seats for Republican members. Now, luckily for the Republicans, that loss of 4 seats on that incredibly crucial committee that's right at the heart of the Russia investigation, them losing 4 seats on that committee didn't entail very hard decision-making for the Republican leadership. And that's because they lost 4 seats, but also 4 Republican members of Congress who had been on that committee either retired or lost their seats anyway. So they were gone. So it wasn't like a really difficult game of musical chairs there. They lost 4 guys and they lost 4 guys. Guess which seats just got emptied? Nevertheless, Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and the Republican House leadership, they waited a full 2 weeks before naming new members to the Intelligence Committee today, even though they basically ended up just carrying over their entire membership from the last Congress. There was 1 guy they swapped out, but that was it. NBC News reports tonight that the delay may have had a material effect on Robert Mueller and the special counsel's office investigation into Russian interference in the presidential election. Quote, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy formally named the 9 Republican members of the House Intelligence Committee today, ending a weeks-long delay that may have cost special counsel Robert Mueller valuable time to act on potential leads the panel could offer. Democrats, now in the majority on the Intelligence Committee, had vowed that one of their first acts would be to authorize the release of more than 50 witness interview transcripts to special counsel Mueller to aid in his investigation. Members have said they had reason to believe some witnesses lied to the committee, something that has already led Mueller to bring charges against Trump allies, including longtime Trump personal lawyer Michael Cohen and longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone. Now, here's an interesting detail we did not have before today, before this report tonight from NBC News from Mike Memoli and Ken Dilanian and Alex Moe. According to 2 sources familiar with the matter, speaking to NBC News, quote, it is likely that Mueller and his team of investigators have had access to the committee's transcripts already, meaning Mueller and his prosecutors have already been able to look through these witness transcripts, to consider them effectively on an informal basis, to see if there's anything in these witness testimony transcripts that might be important to the Mueller investigation or that might potentially be the basis of further criminal charges if any of those witnesses lied to Congress. So Mueller has apparently been able to look at them in an informal way. But according to Congressman Adam Schiff, who is the chairman of the committee, he tells NBC News tonight that even if Mueller's team has been able to view the witness transcripts thus far, they have been limited in what they can do with that information. According to Schiff tonight, quote, they don't, meaning Mueller doesn't, they don't have the use of those transcripts for perjury prosecutions until we authorize them for that use. The Intelligence Committee has been unable to hold the required vote to release those transcripts to Mueller because of the delay, because of the 2-week-long delay in Republicans naming any members of the committee. The Intelligence Committee hasn't been able to hold that vote. So Democrats named their members 2 weeks ago. Republicans haven't. They've just been sitting on it until finally today. And again, whether or not Mueller wants to bring any further charges on the basis of this testimony to Congress, whether Mueller and his prosecutors want to charge anybody other than Roger Stone and Michael Cohen with lying to Congress on the basis of what they said to the Intelligence Committee, it would appear that Mueller and his prosecutors can't do that until they formally get official transcripts released to them from the committee. And the official transcripts can't go to Mueller until the committee votes to release those transcripts to him for that purpose. And the committee cannot take that vote until they are formally constituted as a committee. And they can't formally constitute themselves as a committee until they have all their members, and they only got all their members today. Having all their members as of today means they will finally be able to hold their first meeting as a committee 3 business days from now, in magical congressional calendar days, that means the earliest possible date at which these witness transcripts can be sent to Robert Mueller, just in case he wants to use them to bring more criminal charges. The earliest date Mueller can get those official transcripts is next Tuesday, February 5th. More than a full month after this Congress was sworn in and supposedly starting its work. The delay from the Republicans at least bought them another month. So we've been covering that logistical detail in the handover of the new Congress. We've been covering that pretty intensively for the last week or so. It looks like that issue is finally going to be resolved. That timeline, you might imagine, has been causing some agita, right, among witnesses. Right? There are specific witnesses who have been accused by members of Congress of having lied in their closed-door testimony to the Intelligence Committee. Once Mueller started charging people for lying to Congress, you can imagine that those witnesses, the ones who know they lied, they've been a little nervous as to whether Mueller might act on their testimony as well. Well, we will know in fairly short order now. We will likely know within a week if that agita is warranted, because Mueller's now about to get 50-plus official transcripts. If you ever are charged with a crime, first of all, I'm sorry. I'm sure you didn't do it. I totally believe in you. But if you are ever charged with a crime in this country, you will have a bunch of, well-known black-letter rights under U.S. criminal law and the rules of American criminal procedure. You will have the right to be represented by competent counsel, even if you can't afford to pay for that counsel. You will have the right to a speedy trial. You'll have the right to have a jury of your peers evaluate the case against you, against the presumption of your innocence, unless and until prosecutors prove their case against you beyond a reasonable doubt. And those rights, those are like the Perry Mason ones, right? Those are like the ones from Law and Order. Those are the ones we know from crime dramas and after-school specials, even if we haven't gone to law school. But one of the less exciting things you also have a right to as a criminal defendant in this country is that you have the right to see what the prosecution has against you, what they've got on you that led them to charge you and have you arrested in the first place. You get to see the evidence. In both civil cases and in criminal cases, that part of criminal procedure, or that part of trial procedure, that's often where some of the juiciest fighting is. It almost never makes it into the TV shows about the law, but it's where a lot of the fighting takes place. It's where a lot of the time gets elapsed when these things tie up courtroom time. But it's also this part of the process that is also where you get the best and most interesting strategy, the most interesting strategic fights on the part of both the prosecution and the defense. And that is what we are seeing in some of the big news that broke today on the scandals swirling around this presidency and the legal cases that have derived from the Russian attack on our election and the special counsel's investigation into that. Once you are charged, once you are a criminal defendant, before you ever get to trial, there is this process called discovery. And the discovery process is the process by which you, the defendant, are entitled to get from prosecutors the material that they've used to build their case against you, right, to get you charged with this crime in the first place. The reason you have a right to see that stuff before your trial, it makes sense when you think in broad terms about what it really means to have a truly fair trial. If you weren't allowed to see any of this evidence beforehand, if you weren't allowed to see the material that they used to build their case against you, you really wouldn't have a reasonable chance on the defense side at beating the prosecutor's case, right? When the discovery process works the way it's supposed to, you are supposed to be protected from being blindsided by evidence you didn't know was coming at you. So if they're using witnesses to testify against you, you get to know about those witnesses and that witness testimony in advance, just in case your side wants to try to show that those witnesses are unreliable, or they are somehow unreasonably biased against you, or you can put up competing witnesses that might offer an equally or more compelling story about the same set of facts. If it is a case that is based on documents and records, ahead of your trial, you will get to see what those documents and records are. So you can, maybe challenge the veracity of those documents and records, or put them in different context, or otherwise build up your case against what prosecutors are trying to use as evidence to prove. Whatever prosecutors want to charge you with, you as a criminal defendant have a right to see the basis for their charges. You have a right to see the evidence they have stacked up. That's the discovery process. And I know it's not as cinematic as like, you have the right to remain silent, right? It doesn't make it into all the movies. But it is just as important. And it really is where some of the most interesting strategy comes out in legal fights, including, as I mentioned, in today's news surrounding the scandals of this presidency and Russia interfering in our election. Because almost a year ago, in February of last year, the Justice Department announced charges against the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, Russia, right? You remember this. The Internet Research Agency running this online disinformation campaign on behalf of the Kremlin as part of the Russian effort to mess with the election and sway it against Hillary Clinton and toward Donald Trump. The defendants in that indictment were all Russian. It was all individual employees of the Internet Research Agency. It was the guy who owned and reportedly ran that organization, a guy named Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's a billionaire Russian oligarch. He's close to Putin, close to the Kremlin. Prosecutors also charged the corporate entity that Prigozhin owns and runs, which is called Concord Management. The Internet Research Agency was allegedly sort of a subsidiary within Concord Management. Russia, of course, doesn't extradite its citizens to the United States to face criminal trial here. So when that indictment was unsealed, there was no real expectation that anybody charged in that indictment would ever be arrested or would ever set foot in a U.S. courtroom to face those charges. Same thing was true about the other indictment that was brought against Russian military intelligence officers from the GRU, right? I mean, those indictments against all those Russians, they contained lots of information that we, the public, were able to see in those court filings, spelling out what Russia allegedly did and how they allegedly did it. It was fascinating in terms of us understanding this scandal and what happened to our country. But there was almost no expectation that any trial would ever derive from those indictments, that any subsequent legal proceeding at all would ever derive from those indictments. Yeah, the indictments are brought, they're speaking indictments, they tell us what happened, they spell out the allegations, but nobody's ever actually going to have a trial because these are Russians who were indicted and Russia's not going to let them come over here to go to face U.S. justice. And the one tiny little surprise exception to that dynamic around those cases that Robert Mueller brought against all those Russians, the one exception to that dynamic pertains to Concord Management. So Yevgeny Prigozhin is the oligarch who ran the Internet Research Agency. Him and all these individual people who worked at the Internet Research Agency, they were all charged as part of the Internet Research Agency indictment. Them and all those GRU officers, none of them ever even bothered to respond to the fact that they were indicted in federal court in the United States. But when it came to Concord Management as one of these criminal defendants, they tried to pull off an odd little legal gambit. Concord Management, this corporate entity run by that Russian oligarch, this guy Prigozhin, they did decide to respond. They hired U.S. lawyers, and they did take up their part of the case as one of the defendants charged in this indictment. And the reason I say this was an interesting legal gambit is because this appears to have been effectively the Kremlin's effort, or a Kremlin-adjacent effort, to have them sort of, like have their cake and eat it too. I mean, none of their actual citizens, no actual Russian citizens, including this Russian oligarch, would ever step foot in a U.S. courtroom. None of them would ever have any actual vulnerability to U.S. justice. But by having this corporate entity, Concord Management, this company, actually turn up in U.S. federal court as a criminal defendant, it appears what they hoped they'd accomplish by that was that they'd be able to sort of cash in on all the rights that a criminal defendant has in the U.S. justice system. Particularly, they decided to cash in on discovery. By giving Concord Management's U.S. attorneys and having that, by giving Concord Management's U.S. attorneys to appear in court for them, by having that corporate entity appear in U.S. court as a defendant, they have since tried to use the discovery process in that trial to get everything they can from the U.S. Justice Department about the Russia investigation, about Robert Mueller, about the work of the special counsel's office. They've been using the discovery process, the fact that they're appearing in court as a defendant, they've been trying to get whatever evidence they can about what allowed Mueller to compile these charges, what evidence they were able to pile up against all these Russian entities. So they're thinking no actual Russians need to face legal jeopardy here, but by having a Russian corporation turn up, maybe we can use the discovery process for that corporation to get all this information about what Mueller knows and how he knows it. So it's a clever little gambit that they pulled. And it has already resulted in a big knockdown, drag-out legal fight over a whole bunch of weeks and months now. You might remember earlier this month, one of the requests for discovery materials from the lawyers for Concord Management led the federal judge in this case to dress down and humiliate the Concord Management lawyer in open court. She singled out the Concord Management lawyer at an open hearing by name. She said to him, standing there in court, "I will tell you now that I found your recent filings to be unprofessional, inappropriate, and ineffective." The judge said, "You will prevail on your motion for the release of sensitive discovery if and only if the facts and the law are on your side. Meritless personal attacks on the special counsel, his attorneys, other members of the trial team will play no role in my decision on your motion, nor will inappropriate and what you clearly believe to be clever quotes from movies, cartoons, and elsewhere," which he had actually included in his filing. Quote, "Your strategy is ineffective. It is undermining your credibility in this courthouse. I will say it plain and simple. Knock it off." That was the judge, the Trump-appointed judge, dressing down the lawyer for Concord Management in court just a couple of weeks ago. And that's part of this whole fight over discovery. They're using the Concord Management case to try to get as much discovery they can about the Mueller investigation. In making their case that they ought to have access to all of this sensitive material through discovery, they so offended the judge that she caused that humiliation to rain down on that lawyer in open court. That is where we left this fight a couple of weeks ago. And now today, prosecutors say the whole thing has gone haywire in a way we had no idea of before. So this is a new filing from prosecutors. It's prosecutors from the Special Counsel's Office and from the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. and from the National Security Division of the Justice Department. They filed this today, telling the judge in this case why they object to these continuing requests from Concord Management to obtain discovery in this case, to use this case to get detailed, sensitive information about the work of the Special Counsel's Office and the Russia investigation. And what these prosecutors allege today in this filing is that these guys for this Russian company, they should not be allowed to see anything more sensitive than they've already been able to get through discovery. Because even the so-called non-sensitive stuff they have obtained through the discovery process so far, what they say today is that that material that they've obtained in discovery thus far, it has all of a sudden turned up in Russia in altered form, doctored, and then used for what appears to be a kind of disinformation campaign to try to publicly discredit the Mueller investigation, using U.S. journalists as part of the ploy. What? This is from the filing. Quote, "On October 22nd, 2018, so this past October, the newly created Twitter account Hacking Redstone published the following tweet. Quote, "We've got access to the Special Counsel Mueller's probe database as we hacked Russian server with info from the Russian troll case, Concord LLC versus Mueller. You can view all the files Mueller has about the Internet Research Agency and Russian collusion. Enjoy the reading." The tweet also included a link to a web page located on an online file sharing portal. The web page contained file folders with names and folder structures that are unique to the names and structures of the materials produced by the government in discovery, including tracking numbers assigned by the Special Counsel's Office. So what this means is that as a criminal defendant, obviously Concord Management is entitled to the same rights as any criminal defendant. They are entitled to see what the government has against them in terms of evidence. What evidence the government has used to build its case against Concord Management. When the Special Counsel's Office assembled some of that material to provide to the other side in the discovery process, when they assembled that material and sent it to the attorneys for Concord Management, somehow that material ended up online being shopped by an anonymous, newly created Twitter handle as if this information had been stolen directly from the Special Counsel's Office by some hacker who was somehow able to break into their servers and show you all their secrets. According to this filing today, Robert Mueller, special counsel, says nobody actually broke into their servers. Nobody has actually violated their own security in the special counsel's office. What ended up online in Russia was the material that was sent to these lawyers for Concord Management as part of the criminal case, as part of the discovery process. And in this case, there is a protective order from the court which says that any materials provided under discovery can only be used for the purpose of preparing a criminal defense in this case. You can't take the stuff you get in discovery and then just disseminate it anywhere. You can't just give it away. You can't just make it public. You're only supposed to be able to use it inside the confines of this case. Contrary to that order, what actually happened to that stuff they got through discovery is that apparently the stuff got sifted through. A bunch of those files got posted online. They got put in this online data portal. And then somebody anonymously claimed that they'd hacked that material out of Mueller's office and they were going to make it available to the U.S. public by shopping it to U.S. journalists, saying it was the sum total of everything that Mueller has been able to assemble in terms of evidence on the issue of, quote, Russian collusion. Now, I'm not a lawyer. We'll get some expert advice from somebody who's a very good lawyer who understands these things to make sure we're grasping the real significance of what happened here and what's going on in this court case. But A, this is a surprise. Like, really? That's what's happening in this court case? And there's a couple things that jump out at me here. Actually, there's three things. The third thing is personal, and it is a small thing, and I will get to that in a second. But there's two substantive things here. One is, why is Robert Mueller so mad about this? I mean, to me, this is sort of amazing as a plot point. I don't know that I get it in terms of legal significance, but in terms of the human drama here, what is amazing is what the special counsel spells out about the nature of this material as it was posted online. What they're saying here in this filing is that this wasn't just the material from the discovery process. It got handed over to these lawyers, got somehow hijacked or diverted or handed off, and then it was uploaded wholesale to a public place where it shouldn't have been. They're not saying that's what happened here. What the special counsel is saying here is that their discovery materials were clearly obtained in Russia, and they were used in a way they shouldn't have been. But the stuff wasn't just taken wholesale and made publicly available as a whole entity. It was sifted through. The stuff that was provided to these lawyers in discovery was gone through in such a way as to make it as boring and unimpressive as possible, as not damning as possible. The prosecutors say whoever went through this discovery material took about 1,000 files that really were from the discovery, from the pretrial process in this case. And according to this filing today, those 1,000 plus matching files, they included images of political memes from Facebook and other social media accounts that were posted and reposted online by the Internet Research Agency. Prosecutors say in this filing that these were the types of memes and images that aren't exactly an impressive stash of evidence. Prosecutors say that these memes and images are, quote, presumably still available elsewhere on the Internet. And so what was posted online here is the sort of supposed, the allegedly, the crown jewels that had been hacked from Mueller were basically pointless images of political memes that don't add up to an impressive stack of evidence. And prosecutors say those 1,000 plus files were mixed in with lots of other files that they call, quote, totally irrelevant. And that's part of why the special counsel's office appears to be so miffed here. Because what they're alleging is that this pretrial discovery process was abused in order to try to create a public perception in this country about what Mueller had on Russia collusion and Russian interference in the election. This effort was to try to create a misimpression that Mueller had come up dry, that the Mueller investigation didn't really turn up any interesting evidence. Quote, the dissemination of the link to the webpage via a Twitter message claiming to provide access to all the files Mueller had about IRA and Russian collusion, and the fact that the webpage contained numerous irrelevant files suggests that the person who created the webpage used their knowledge of non-sensitive discovery to make it appear as though the irrelevant files contained on the webpage were the sum total evidence of IRA and Russian collusion gathered by law enforcement in this matter, in an apparent effort to discredit the investigation. So the point of the filing is, no, you cannot have access to super sensitive, national security sensitive material in this case. And in particular, you can't send it to Russia to your clients. And that's because even when we gave you non-sensitive material, it turned up in Russia. And it turned up in Russia as part of an op to make it seem like the Russia investigation and the whole Mueller investigation is a dud, that Mueller had turned up no evidence. In other words, Your Honor, the defendants here are abusing the U.S. court system and the rights afforded to U.S. criminal defendants to continue a Russian influence operation that's designed to help Russia get away with what they did and to undermine the effectiveness and the impact of this investigation in the United States that has thus far ferreted out their bad activity and resulted in lots of indictments and dozens of felony charges. So why the special counsel's office is so mad about this is fascinating. You're trying to make it look like we got nothing? Oh, you'll be surprised. I mean, the other thing that's going to be fascinating to watch here is what the judge does with this. I mean, the judge in this case has not been willing to suffer fools already. She has already been confrontational in the past when she feels like her courtroom is being misused for unprofessional purposes in this case. So we await the judge's response to this as well. It'll be interesting to see whether the judge thinks anybody ought to get in trouble for someone in Russia obtaining all of these materials that were supposed to be held confidential by these American lawyers. Do these American lawyers get in trouble for that? Does their American law firm get in trouble for that? Is the defendant in this case otherwise sanctioned? But as I mentioned, there's just one other little element here I said it was personal. It's not necessarily personal. It does pertain to this show, though. There are a couple of American reporters, Josh Russell and Casey Michel, who say that they were targeted by this Russian anonymous Twitter handle, supposedly offering all this material that had allegedly been stolen from Robert Mueller in the special counsel's office. Casey and Josh have both been great today about making public what these overtures looked like from this Russian account, what they were offered by this Russian account, so we can have a better understanding of how this op worked. This op that allegedly was trying to undermine the Mueller investigation and make it look like they had nothing. The reason I say there's a sort of personal element to this is that there are some indications that I may have been the third target of this effort. Or at least this show may have been the third known target of this effort by this anonymous Russian Twitter handle. I will just tell you, I have nothing exciting I can tell you about that. We are still trying to track that down. When this indictment came out today and when Josh and Casey started talking publicly about how they had been targeted and how they had been shopped this stuff, that was the first we'd heard that we might have already been targeted in this way as well. So we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to track it down. We will keep you posted if we learn anything further. But again, right now at this point, we're trying to figure out if we were somehow caught up in this mess, and if so, did it give us anything interesting we can show on TV? So it's been a fascinating day in the news, lots of surprises. We've got Barbara McQuade joining us tonight. We've got a Wall Street Journal reporter here tonight on something truly alarming that just happened in the Intelligence Committee. We've actually got some good news coming up for you tonight, right at the end of the show. There's lots to come tonight. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.